Before we start, I want to give you a standard disclaimer. Nothing that we're discussing is meant to be investment advice. You should speak to your tax attorney, your accountant, and your investment advisor for any sort of investment advice or tax advice or legal advice. Not us, definitely.
We saw the Indian rupee depreciate against the US dollar this week and closed Friday at 71.89 compared to 70.50 last week, down about 1.97%.
I guess after the news about Urjit Patel leaving, the rupee dropped a good amount.
Absolutely, because obviously there has been, the administration and the RBI has been a little concerned about what's going on with the NPAs and governments putting more restriction on weaker banks not to lend money. And also, they're worried about the financial health of the banks, and next year being election year, the administration doesn't want those type of restrictions.
Yeah. So, with the head of the RBI resigning this week, there's been a lot of chatter about the politicization of central banks and kind of what that could mean. With his resignation and the appointment of Shantikanta Das virtually the next day, what do you think this means for the rupee and the Indian economy? And is it really going to have any sort of impact, or is it going to be more business as usual?
So that's always going to be the case in growing economy, where administrations usually do not agree with the central banks on raising rates, monetary policy changes, etc. In case of Urjit Patel, it's a bit different. India is on a third governor in 3 years. Raghuram Rajan, who's a rock star, now he's in Chicago, and then obviously Mr. Patel coming in and doing a very good job following his policy, and then now Mr. Das. Obviously, Mr. Das is not an economist, so I think the market is feeling as we see the rupee slid down to almost 70 to 80 earlier, but then it recovered. And on top of that, India has been battling NPAs for the last 5 years. Reserve Bank of India has been tackling these issues and has implemented several strategies which did not sit well with the current regime.
So, sorry to interrupt you there for a second, but with these non-performing assets, how is the RBI really getting involved in some of this stuff?
So what they're saying is, as I said earlier, it's the financial health of these banks, whatever their lending criteria. They're trying to clean up this mess. Look, you can't lend on these criteria, or they're not letting them lend above their certain ratios.
So is it similar to the stress test that the Federal Reserve puts on U.S. banks? So similar type of...
Very similar to that stress test.
Gotcha.
Remember, Mr. Rajan is obviously a rock star from the U.S. And he's trying to implement those strategies in India. Yep. And then his protege is Mr. Patel, who has tried to do the same thing.
Gotcha. Cool.
But ICC India's sovereign rating is BBB with a stable book according to Fitch. But Fitch downwards India's growth to 7.2% from 7.8 for the current fiscal year. On Tuesday, the government appointed former Economic Affairs Mr. Das, like you appointed, but he was the same person who was involved with India's demonetization, which did not sit well even from Mr. Forbes. He was pretty vocal about that. This is kind of dehumanizing and risking one's economy. With the departure of Mr. Patel, rupee will continue to fall as finance ministry's interference with the Reserve Bank of India. I think this will continue to play because Mr. Das worked for the regime in the past.
So are we looking at 80 rupees to the dollar? Are we looking at 65 rupees to the dollar?
I think rupee will, as it's election year, I think rupee will continue to slide. I think we're gonna see rupee hitting 80. USD to rupee will hit 80.
Interesting.
Or higher.
Well,